And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, roger, Atlantis.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. Off. It's orange!
Orange 25! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage.
What do you think?
Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
If the methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. We don't need any more of these.
Live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where SpaceX is getting ready to launch a Falcon 9 on not your ordinary Starlink mission, because this is a customer mission. This is SXM-10 for Sirius XM satellite radio on its way to geostationary transfer orbit. I am Sawyer Rosenstein, and I will be your host for this evening's launch broadcast. I see the 5x5s in chat, meaning you can hear me there, so I very much appreciate it. I am, of course, not alone. You won't have to hear just me tonight. You'll also get to hear Ryan Weber. Ryan, how's it going?
Going fantastic, Sawyer. How about you?
It's been quite a day, that's for sure. With the static fire, and then the flame trench, and then the SCL, and then the SXM. So, or SPL. Or what am I talking about? TWIS. Too many acronyms here at NSF. If only we had a video explaining acronyms. Anyway, joining us from the field tonight is Max Evans. Max, how's it going?
Good evening, everybody. It's not a Starlink, as you were just saying. So, yeah, we are off to. Actually, we are at the same perspective that we normally do for Slick 40 at the KSC press site. But the weather is clearing out after a rather crummy day, it has to be said. Skies are clearing out, stars are coming out, and Falcon 9 is getting ready to go. So, fingers crossed.
I'm going to start right with you on that, Max, because if I remember, just about an hour ago, there was a Phase 2 lightning warning in the area. How is the weather looking at the moment?
Weather's looking better. There was a Phase 1 and Phase 2 lightning warning issued about a little over an hour ago as a late evening cell just rolled through. It tends to happen because the atmosphere in this part of Florida, and Florida in general, really, as we get towards the summer months, is rather unstable, and weather can just pop up literally out of nowhere. It happens fast. So we were in a Phase 1, then a Phase 2 lightning warning. A storm washed over and delayed setup a little bit, but that has since cleared, and the weather is looking better for liftoff as we speak.
Yes, what do Florida and I have in common? We're both unstable.
No, Jesus.
Sorry.
No, Jesus.
The one that is keeping us stable, though, and stable video feed at least, is Carson Phillips, who's going to be pushing the buttons, pulling the levers on today's stream. And as a reminder, if you have any questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. So, Ryan, let's talk a little bit about this particular mission, since it's not 23 or 29 Starlink V2 mini satellites. Can you talk a little bit about the SXM-10 mission?
Yeah, so it's for any of you who have heard of Sirius XM radio, that's what this is. It is a Sirius XM satellite going into, it's going to get put into GTO, geostationary transfer orbit, and well, basically it's going to help augment their network for, satellite radio. This is SpaceX's 72nd launch of the year, which is kind of nuts that we're beginning of June at this point. Their third launch of the month, and it's 6 days in. Falcon 9's 133rd launch since the last failure, so they keep rolling on. 480th orbital flight. They're getting close to that 500 mark. They're getting there. They're almost there. Or 256 launch from Slick 40, which is you just keep adding these numbers up every time, and it's not even a Starlink mission. This is a customer payload. It's not like it's not your typical Falcon 9 launch, as much as Starlinks are Starlinks, but 112th landing on ASOG out of 113 attempts, and then 117 successful landings since the last one failed. So there's a lot of stats, as there always is with these Falcon 9 flights, to just keep kind of adding one to the ticker as they keep going. And yeah, it's a customer payload, so it's a little more interesting than just the Starlink mission. But I don't know, Starlink missions are also interesting because it's still Starlink.
Yeah, by the way, when you said this is not your ordinary Falcon launch, I feel like that's the Temu version of not your ordinary Starlink, and I love it.
It seems like nowadays, so you're not wrong.
Well, since this isn't Starlink and it is going in a slightly different direction here, Max, where should people be looking for this one? What's the trajectory for tonight, and who's downrange?
So because this payload with SXM-10 is going off to a geostationary transfer orbit, it is essentially heading straight east off the coast of Florida. So whether you are north or south of the launch pad, your view should be about the same depending on your distance to the pad, which is a nice change because the Starlink Group 6 shells and the Group 12 shells are the ones that normally fly southeast at about a 43-degree inclination going just north of the Bahamas, but a pleasant change of pace here going off to GTO and going straight east. From our perspective here at the KSC press site, normally those Starlink missions tend to fly off to the right-hand side, whereas tonight it is going to curve off slightly to the left, kind of towards Slick 41, which is kind of a nice change of pace. But whether you are north or south of the pad, assuming you have good weather, your view should be about the same. But the key words there are if the weather by you is cooperating, because it really has not today, unfortunately, here in Florida.
Yeah, but they do have a 4-hour window for this, so there is still plenty of time for it. Of course, we'll see if they begin fueling, and that will be our biggest indicator. But you can see there, that is the sort of downrange bubble that we can expect for a shortfall of gravitas to be located downrange to catch this booster. And then, of course, we also have the fairing recovery vessel, which for this flight is Doug. Yes. Now, here's an interesting thing that we have here. And Ryan, I'm going to put this one to you. This is a SiriusXM geostationary transfer orbit mission that has a deorbit burn. If I remember correctly, this would be the first Falcon 9 GTO mission like this, at least for these Sirius satellites, that is having a deorbit burn.
Yeah, so SpaceX, it definitely looks like they're going to try to deorbit this second stage, which is somewhat unusual for doing it with such a high energy mission. However, what was it Alex put in the back channel? So they did a deorbit burn. What was it? GPS-3 SV08. That was a 388 by 20,000 kilometer orbit at 55-degree inclination. This SXM-9 that did a deorbit burn, by the way. SXM-9 went to 192 by 23,643 kilometers at 27-degree inclination, and that didn't do one. If this one, what are the stats of this one? I'm having to switch through a bunch of stuff here. This one's gonna go
250 by 21,300.
Yeah, there you go. It looks like SpaceX is going to try to, do deorbit burn with such a high energy orbit, which is kind of something they haven't tried before. Maybe they've been able to get a little more performance out of the vehicle since the last time they did one of these. So, yeah, less space junk, and also it basically lets them control the reentry corridor rather than just having it reenter uncontrolled, and whatnot. Because we know that COPVs can have a tendency to survive reentry sometimes. So having the ability to actually control it on reentry would be a big bonus for them.
If they can survive Starship explosions, yeah, they can survive reentry. They are beasts of vessels, but It is unusual. And again, we're talking a 2,000 kilometer lower apogee, so the highest point in the orbit, compared to SXM-9, which had no deorbit burns. So this is, from our records at least, a first for Falcon 9 for this type of mission. So that will be very cool to see.
And it's worth noting, actually, really quickly, that the payload itself masses about 6,400 kilograms, and usually Falcon 9 has the capacity to lift a payload of about 8,300 kilograms into GTO, or a geostationary transfer orbit. So they're about 2 tons under what they would normally be able to carry at their maximum, which means I guess they have enough propellant left over, assuming enough doesn't boil off, to perform a deorbit burn and bring that second stage down. So I believe that is why they have the ability to make it back to bring the stage 2 back down.
Exactly. And of course, we talk about stage 2, but we can't forget about stage 1 being the booster for this flight. Max, what booster do we have flying?
So actually, correction. Before we get to that, Alex actually just corrected me that Falcon 9 actually had the 8,300 kilo weight limit to GTO is actually in with Falcon 9's fully expendable mode. So my apologies on that one, but they must have enough margin in there to perform that burn and bring it back. But either way, back to the original point that you were just talking about, Sawyer. Tonight on the docket over at Slick 40 is booster B1085, and this will be its 8th mission, assuming all goes according to plan tonight. 8 flights for a Falcon 9 booster is still rather young nowadays, because a majority of the boosters now are at 15 flights and above, which is bonkers to say, considering 3 to 4 years ago, a booster flying 5 times seemed like it was the end of the world and that it was going to pop at any moment. But now we have boosters flying upwards of 28 times and still continuing strong. But in terms of its flight history, this booster started out in life with Crew 9, RRT-1, Firefly Blue Ghost Mission 1, Fram 2, and 3 previous Starlink missions. So a rather young booster, as we have said. But surely, if SpaceX keeps up the pace of launch cadence that they have been, this booster will be gaining a lot more flight experience in no time at all.
And very interesting, some of the missions we were just talking about, the GPS missions. This one launching GPS-07, and unfortunately, with everything that happened with Hakuto-R mission 2, the booster that did launch it earlier this year, this particular one, I believe. So it's a bit of a shame. Again, our hearts go out to the team that worked at iSpace on that. It's a shame it didn't land, but we know they'll come back with Hakuto-R mission 3 stronger. Let's see here. So we're talking a lot about the orbit and all of the inclination on this. So Ryan, let's do a quick orbital mechanics lesson. Curbless Sphere is asking, first off, why is it called geostationary transfer orbit? Where is it transferring to? And can you explain orbital inclination like I'm 5?
So GTO, and I guess Alex can jump in here in the back channel if I get this wrong, because I'm not the expert. I'm not an entire expert on this. I know the basic knowledge of it. I'll just put a disclaimer in front of that. So GTO, basically you get your apogee up to basically geostation to geo is where your apogee gets to, which is geostationary orbit. Your perigee is much lower, probably in low Earth orbit. The point of that is it's a transfer orbit. So half your orbit's in there, half your orbit's not. So the satellite does the rest of the work. The satellite has a propulsion system on it. It'll deploy into GTO. The satellite will basically do its burns to get itself into GEO, which is geostationary orbit, which is an orbit in which you can basically orbit over one point of the Earth. But you basically travel with the Earth as it orbits, more or less. So that's what GTO is to GEO. Now, if you're wondering what inclination is the difference in angle referencing the Earth, the plane of the Earth. So say the equator is 0. Okay. Well, if you're going 20 degrees above the equator, you're 20-degree inclination. So it's basically on a plane. Like the solar system has a plane, 0. And if you want to do an orbit around the solar system, which, whatever, you want to do an orbit around the solar system, there would be a certain degree to inclination basically. So That's their basics of orbital mechanics. But yeah, more or less.
Yep. So there you go. So basically, geostationary orbit, like you said, it's in the exact same spot in the sky relative to the Earth 24 hours a day. So that's why it's that way. But yeah, it's transferring it to that geostationary orbit, giving it a little bit of time there to let the first stage have a lesser trajectory in terms, in this case, to deorbit it and allow the main satellite to do its thing. And we are just getting word of a 5-minute push. So it is a 4-hour window, and they've only chose to bump into it 5 minutes, thankfully. So the new launch time is 11:24 p.m. Eastern time. So not too bad, at least. Just a little 5-minute bump. Let's see here. Here's another question. Of course, we gotta ask it. Will this mission have a stubby nozzle? Max, any thoughts?
As far as we are aware, the upper stage on Falcon 9 tonight is not going to be equipped with a stubby nozzle. That nozzle is used only under very, very specific circumstances where the weight and performance penalty that come with them or come with it fall into the margins of the mission and the work that the upper stage can do with the massive payload aboard. Essentially, with a smaller MVAC vacuum nozzle, the engine is able to do less work and it has less thrust and takes a huge hit on efficiency. But with that, they gain, or I should say, the mass that they save with the nozzle is actually pretty significant, and they also save the cost of having to manufacture the nozzle, which is made of an alloy mixture of niobium, pricey and difficult and I guess strenuous to manufacture. So if they don't have to do it, they won't. But in this case, with the weight of the payload on board and where it needs to go, and the performance needed from Falcon 9's upper stage, it is likely safe to assume that the full-size MVAC nozzle is fitted to the MVAC engine tonight.
The best nozzle, yes. I know you agree with that, Max, right?
Right, Sawyer. Yeah, totally. Sure. Sure.
Yes, Max, the stubby nozzle fan. It's okay. Everyone's allowed to have their flaws.
I'm just not. I haven't even talked about it. Like I don't want to get into the tribalism anymore, to be honest.
Wow. Okay, East Coast, West Coast, cool.
That's
tribalism done.
That's fine by me as well. But I don't want to be picking fights. There's been enough fighting. There's been enough fighting this week, Sawyer. I think it has to be said.
Okay, that is fair.
let's just enjoy a Falcon 9 launch, shall we?
Of course. Here's one from Misty, and this is a really good question. They're asking, Ryan, can the fairings on the Falcons be extended or shortened based on the payload size?
Well, they can't be extended based on the payload size. SpaceX is making an extended fairing that's for specific missions on Falcon Heavy. At least just for Falcon Heavy, as far as I'm aware. I don't know if they plan on using it on Falcon 9. But you can't really extend and retract that fairing. It's made out of carbon fiber. Once that's made, that's it. That's the fairing you're going to make. They're not going to make specialized fairings for specialized payloads because that requires tooling of all different sizes, different size autoclaves to cook and make the fairings. It's what is it? Each one of those fairings is $5 million a pop, give or take.
I believe so.
Trying to specialize that would probably jack that price up to 12 or more. Because you'd have to have specialized tooling and everything like that. So they can't do that. It just, even if it's a really, really small payload, it fits in a fairing. That's just kind of how it works. It's basically the same thing with all rockets. This isn't, it's not like you can do Kerbal where you just stick it and you can, adjust the size of your fairing like that. Oh, that would be kind of cool.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that would be nice to be able to make your own fairing like that, but alas, not the case. So we have seen missions where it's the tiniest little satellite and a giant fairing, basically what Escapade is going to be when it launches on New Glenn, because Falcon is not the only one that deals with the fixed fairing. In fact, most companies deal with a fixed fairing, although some do offer the extended variant. We haven't seen one actually fly. We've just seen the model of one with SpaceX. We know Vulcan has 2 different ones as well, so we've seen that. So it's an option out there. And then even Atlas had the 4-meter and the 5-meter.
I was just gonna say, yeah. I know that fairing, that the larger fairing that SpaceX is building right now is solely for Falcon Heavy use, and they will not be recovered. But we are hoping to see those in action rather soon. But honestly, we've heard next to nothing about when those are going to be debuted. But that is going to be. I don't want to say it's going to be a cursed sight, but I think the fact that Falcon Heavy has 3 cores put together with that big fairing as opposed to a single stick Falcon 9 might help the image just a little bit.
Yeah. Let's not go there to the silly place.
The silly place.
Let's see here. We are getting down to the T-minus 40-minute mark, so we're getting close to the main parts of the countdown. Max, can you walk us through what the countdown will be? At least for what we can experience in the coming minutes, hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming up, we are quickly approaching the point in time where the SpaceX launch director will either verify that the vehicle and ground systems are either go or no go for propellant load. So at that point, if the launch director opts to go for prop load, that will commence at T-minus 35 minutes for both stage 1. Stage 1 RP1 and liquid oxygen, as well as stage 2 RP1. Stage 2 liquid oxygen will commence at about T-minus 16 minutes once the T-minus 20-minute event occurs. So coming up quick on that, assuming there aren't any more delays. I haven't seen anything. Have you guys seen any more word on delays yet?
I'm updating the SpaceX website, and I'm not seeing anything. I've not seen anything on official feeds. Let me say that. So we will keep an eye out for that, for any potential updates. Obviously, the weather has been sketchy there today, to say the absolute least. So there's potential there could be weather they're watching out for. There's always potential it could be something with rockets, but they'd rather, again, it's one of those where you'd rather be on the ground wishing you were in the air than in the air wishing you were on the ground. But as of right now, SpaceX still publicly saying 11:24 p.m. Eastern time. So that is the time we have on our clock. And there you can see the weather, that 15% improving to 5%. So it's a 15% chance of violation. So 85% go, improving to 95. But it's Florida. This is the time of year where you get the random storms that pop up. They blow through insanely quick, but they pack a punch. And so you got to wait for them to totally clear out. Let's see here. Severin saying, I heard rumors of a potential Falcon Heavy center core recovery in December. If true, Jerdy or ASOG, I know people hate when I say that. Do you think it'll be successful? Do you think we would ever see the center core recovery attempt? I mean, I know there was always the discussion, now that we have seen it at McGregor, of a Falcon center core being used as a Falcon 9 stage, and that one would probably have the landing legs on it to be reused. Jeez Louise, that was loud. Okay. It's all right. Just don't post it in the back channel. Just interrupt. It's fine. 11:39 p.m. Eastern time is the new T0 that we officially see here on the website. So that time has been updated. We will update the clock in the top left to it as well. They have not said any reason, but they have updated that. And the window, as you see there, closes at 3:18 a.m. Eastern time. So that is 3.5 hours from now. Or 4.5 hours now.
It's a full 4-hour window, much like many of the Starlink missions that we have going up out of the Cape. So SpaceX has plenty of time to work with should they need it. And so far, it looks like they have needed a few minutes to sort out either small GSE problems they're having or vehicle problems, or they are waiting for some weather in the flight path or some that is approaching to clear out and fizzle out. So not a huge deal, the fact that they are only pushing about this long into the window so far. I don't want to be jinxing anything. But I wouldn't say it's the end of the world just yet.
Carson, don't worry. I'm wide awake. I was in the middle of discussing something, and all of a sudden, good morning to everyone that was just listening in and is now wide awake.
It's not midnight yet. It's still night.
True. Although Chris Bergen in chat saying, SpaceX does not have plenty of time. I want to go to bed.
That's
Don't blame
fair.
you.
Tell him.
But anyway, Ryan, about that possibility of actually trying to recover a center core from Falcon Heavy again, because they haven't tried that since the second flight, if I remember, STP-2.
Yeah, it kind of became a thing. It's like they RTLS the two sides and then would just expend the center to get all the possible performance out of it. They, depending on the mission that they do, they might try to recover it again, because of course they haven't done it yet. And then maybe reuse it, or at least they want to get it back to see if it could be reused. Because as much as people want to think that Starship's going to take over instantly as soon as it's available, it's like Falcon Heavy is still going to be flying for a while. It's got a lot of potential left in it. So if SpaceX could actually start recovering their center cores on them, why not try? It's kind of one of those things. It's like if you get the capability to do it, you might as well try. There's no harm in trying it. So.
Oh yeah, exactly. If you've got the resources for it, might as well. Because one of the biggest issues that we've always discussed here is the fact that right now their hottest commodity are those drone ships. If they were to have both of them out for a Falcon Heavy mission and do the catch, it would then still take them about 2 days or so to return. They may be a little farther out, given that they're Falcon Heavy. So let's say about 2 days to return to port, offload them, then get them back out into position. We're talking potentially 4 or 5 days, which in SpaceX time is an eternity when they're launching every 3 days or so, or they can launch back-to-back days because they have 2 different drone ships. That takes away that capability. So I can see for one maybe, but even so, that is usually over 1,000 kilometers out, which is quite far downrange. Let's see here. Well, this is a Florida stream, so it's perfect to ask this one. It's Paradox. This one, I'll throw to you, Max. They're saying, did you hear about the recent Starship catch tower plans for Slick 37 and the 76 planned launches from Florida? If so, what are your opinions?
Of course we did. It actually came out right in the middle of our static fire stream this morning, or this afternoon, I should say, of Booster 16. The proposed complex plans for Launch Complex 37 over on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station are rather impressive, I do have to say. While over at 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center, there's currently only one Starship tower for both launch and catch. They may add a second one there at some point. I'm not quite sure. But the current plan for Slick 37 is rather massive. That means that a majority of Starship launch cadence and activity will be happening over there. But that means that they'll have to make the transport all the way over from Hangar X here at the Kennedy Space Center all the way over to Slick 37. And for those who aren't familiar, that is actually quite the trek to go out from the KSC side out onto the Space Force side and all the way down to Space Launch Complex 37. It is quite a drive. But in terms of the actual layout they have over there, it's rather impressive. And honestly, I cannot wait to see it come to fruition. Seeing Starship fly from Florida has been something that we have been dreaming about now for years. And the fact that we are getting so close now to those plans coming to fruition and actual hardware coming here soon in terms of flight hardware beyond what's already being built over at Hangar X, man, I'm so excited. So excited.
Yeah, it's going to be a horizontal transport, so that would be very interesting to see. And it would be my guess, at least, for getting it to Florida. Once it's here, we'll see how they transport it. But it is quite the drive to go around from Hangar X, past the VAB, past 39A, past 41, past 40, all the way down. Causeways, there's turns. It's quite the trek. And I don't even know how I'd be able to go over the causeways for that matter, Max.
Yeah, and while the Falcon 9s weren't even able to go over the causeways because of how long they were and how worried SpaceX was about any sort of bending of the actual tank structure of Falcon 9. So, and Starship is obviously much larger, both with the actual ship itself and not to mention the super heavy booster. So, whether or not they're going to be transporting them horizontally over there or vertically from here, we have yet to see. But if I'm honestly, I'm kind of hoping that they end up they end up moving hardware from Hangar X over to whichever complex they're going to be using vertically, because it shows it's a much better, I guess, demonstration of scale compared to if it was just laying down on a transporter.
What were you
Yeah.
gonna say there? Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing in the document they said is they're going to be transporting these things horizontally and for us around 5 years, because you have to remember they currently have a factory built in Starbase, I guess. They have a factory built there as well as bays, and they're just getting started on the Gigabay there. Well, at Florida, they're getting started in the Gigabay, but they don't have a factory. And building the structure is one thing, kitting it out is in another. So it'll take years for them to fully build and kit the whole thing out. And then while they're doing that, they will use the current production facility that they have built to start shipping vehicles over. So once you get a fleet of boosters over at the Cape, then you got a fleet of boosters and starships. Well, you can just launch them and catch them at the towers if you really wanted to. So you fly a mission out of Starbase and then catch them at 39A, and well, there you go. Now you have a ship at 39A or 37. And one of the cool things with this EIS too is we now have confirmation they're going to have 5 pads. So as of right now, if you look at it'll just kind of harken back to the Mars plan that they had. So you're looking at that second Mars window. Okay, that last Mars window, 2020, the first one at end of 26. That's gonna be kind of iffy to get a lot of this stuff up and running. I doubt it'll be up and running. Because they have to build a lot. They have to build a whole tank farm, 2 towers. By the way, the towers are going to be taller, or at least supposedly. Finally,
About 100 feet taller, right?
more. Well, a little bit more than that. Yeah, they're going to be like 2 sections taller, which is I still don't know why they didn't make the tower at Pad B, and yes, it's Pad B, taller. I'm sorry, Dan, it's Pad B.
Pad 2.
in all the documentation, it's Pad B, so it's Pad B. But the you look at that second Mars transfer window, the 2028 to 2029 window. By that point, they're going to have 5 pads, 2 gigabays, and like 2.5 million square feet of factory space just for Starship. Like, because they'll have already rebuilt Pad A and Starbase by that point. So, like,
and mind you as well, the Star Factory that's going to be built here at Hangar X is roughly 1.5 times the size of the Star Factory currently in Starbase. To give you any sort of sense of scale, Star Factory is already massive in size, at well over 1 million square feet, and this will be about 1.5 million square feet over at Hangar X. So it'll take some time for that to come online, but once it is up and running, we are going to be seeing hardware out left, right, and center.
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. We do have another update. We have a new T0 of 12:24 a.m. Eastern Time per the SpaceX website now. So we do have another slight delay, although this one's a little bit longer than the 5-minute push now. So 12:24 a.m. Eastern Time is the new T0 for Sirius XM-10. Oh boy. And we really don't have any updates, Max, on the reasoning for this, right?
Not as far as we can see. The weather here in Florida, at least according to our Mark 1 eyeballs, is still trending in the right directions. The skies are clearing up and a lot more stars are coming out. They must be seeing something downrange that they don't like in terms of either swells or some weather in the area of the LZ, or they are working an active issue on the vehicle or the ground systems itself. But again, they have until 3:18 a.m. Eastern Time here in Florida to use should they need to use it. But at the moment, they have delayed about an hour into the window at this point, so a little concerning. The fact that all these delays have been back to back to each other means that they're actively working on something, but at the moment, there's no insight to exactly what that might be.
Exactly. And of course, we're going to continue to keep you updated as we learn more Let me take a moment, thank some people here. Mr. Gamer.io with the super chat saying, full nozzle like a full slice of cheesecake. Oh my gosh, the cheesecake thing will not die. And then JD Brown, this is a good one for you, Ryan. Why does this mission need a wider gap in the launch window? So I'm guessing why do they have the longer window, while the majority of SpaceX non-Starlink missions need an instantaneous launch attempt?
Depends on the orbit you're going to, depends on the window you can have. It like going to the ISS requires instantaneous because you're trying to make a rendezvous. You're trying to hit a specific point and rendezvous with the ISS. This, you're just trying to get into orbit around a point around the Earth, and you can compensate for that with the rocket plus the satellite itself. So it just kind of depends on your orbit and what your mission is. So
Yeah, like you said, the ISS are instantaneous. There's other ones where we see them with a little bit of a gap. I know that Atlas, we've talked about it before, has its own whole big steering system that allows it sometimes a little more flexibility. But based on the payload and where it's going, that is the case. So at this point, as we figure out what SpaceX is going to do, we are going to take a short commentary break. This is KPFM, Carson Phillips FM, as opposed to KMR FM. But we're going to play some tunes, we're going to leave you the views, and as soon as we get any update from SpaceX, we will join you. If not, we will see you at T-minus 40 minutes. SpaceX is continuing to target 12:54 a.m. Eastern Time for tonight's launch of the SXM-10 satellite for SiriusXM satellite radio. I am Sawyer Rosenstein, joined once again by Ryan and Max, producing with Carson. We are going to jump right back in to where we were as we went into the commentary pause there for tonight's launch. Hopefully, if they are proceeding with this, we should get the go for propellant load momentarily, and that should begin, if all is go, at T-minus 35 minutes, which is why we are now back. So, Ryan, do you mind just giving a quick recap of this satellite and mission for people who may have been joining or forgot because they actually had lives while we were waiting?
Yeah, so this is, as you're saying, Sirius XM radio satellites going to GTO and eventually, well, geostationary. And they've had this 4-hour window, and as you can tell, we've pushed a little bit into it. We're sitting and waiting here for probably or any kind of indication from SpaceX or something that they're going to go ahead here with this launch. So, yeah, just kind of strap in and cross your fingers, I guess, on this one, right? Yeah, it's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Obviously, for those who were joining us during the pause, you saw a little bit of a weather cell that seemed to pop up there. Max, how's it looking right now?
Well, there was a little bit of a random rain shower that seemed to pop up out of nowhere and come through KSC before just completely fizzling out after preparing for the worst case scenario and bagging all of the cameras that we have here just in case. We only got maybe a little bit of a trickle of rain, and that was about it. Nothing really to write home about. But as was before, the weather is moving eastbound out over the Atlantic, and I'm looking behind me. There is a nice, pretty clear sky with a waxing gibbous moon right behind us. So weather, at least for the time being, and I've double-checked the radar, there's nothing coming from the west at the moment that should get in the way. If there is anything else, it's going to be downrange or the vehicle systems. Like, just get this rocket off the ground tonight, please.
Yeah, please. That would be very nice. Thank you very much. Yeah, because right before we went live, or about an hour before, there was a lightning warning phase 2, which is the higher one. It doesn't seem like that's the case right now, though, because that would be prohibitive for fueling, right?
It would be, and there were multiple Phase 1 and Phase 2 warnings here throughout the KSC and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station earlier in the evening. Those have since been cleared, and so have any high wind advisories as well. So weather truly this time seems to be trending in the right direction. SpaceX or any other launch provider here at the Cape cannot go into prop load under a Phase 2 lightning warning at the risk of lightning striking either the launch tower or, heaven forbid, the rocket itself, and risking a full-blown, I guess you could say, just catastrophe if there was any propellant on board the vehicle. Even though Falcon 9 loads and goes, there is still about a 35-minute window where propellant is on board the vehicle and could cause issues. And you don't want that to happen because that would be a very bad day for a lot of people. But as I was just saying earlier, any Phase 1 or Phase 2 lightning warnings or wind advisories have been cleared, and they should be proceeding into prop load in just about 30 seconds if all has gone well. So we will, and if that has been the case, we should keep an eye out on the bottom of the first stage LOX tank, which is just above the shrubbery here right in front of us, in about 3 or 4 minutes' time.
That is what we are hoping to see. And we have confirmation from SpaceX, T-minus 35 minutes until Falcon 9's launch of the SiriusXM-10 mission from Florida. Liftoff is targeted for 12:54 a.m. So there is that official word. So we should be seeing frost form on the rocket very soon.
Woohoo!
Yes, as Alex said in the back channel, seriously, they are going for it.
So I guess you at this point, you could say things are getting pretty serious.
I am
Yes.
serious. And don't call me Shirley. What?
Show you can't be serious. I am serious. And don't call me
Don't
Shirley.
call me Shirley.
Oh, XML. I don't know.
Sawyer drowning. Sawyer is getting out punned tonight. It's a rare occurrence.
I left all my puns in the flame trench, okay? They got burned by the spice.
Oh man.
Now I'm just that portion of my brain apparently pun.exe is no longer functioning. It needs a restart. Let's see. So hopefully we will get into the fueling here and continue onward with the flight tonight. So here's an interesting one as we get ready for everything with the propellant loads and all the lines that need to be chilled down and everything. Joe was asking before the commentary pause, Ryan, we all know they have to condition the lines for the super cooled liquid oxygen, but what do they do to condition the LOX tanks, or do they?
Well, to condition the vehicle, you can use colder gas. So basically, as you chill down the lines, you can also put gas into the vehicle and start to kind of like pressurize the tanks a little bit, and it can kind of chill down the vehicle a little bit as well. Not enough to where you see frost, but enough to kind of chill it down. And then you just start putting liquid propellant in there. And then that chills it down pretty dang quickly after that. So, of course, you don't want to shock cool anything, whether it be lines or tanks or whatever. So, as far as I know, I think that's what they do. But I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head.
That's
It's
for the
easier-
lines, but do they have to condition the tanks?
Well, I think at least for Starship in this example, we can say that yes, they do, because there have been times where we have been eyes on for, say, a static fire over at Massey's, and we think we see frost on the vehicle, but really it's just like a slight bit of condensation on the tanks as they begin to thermally condition them as well. And of course, even then, the gas flowing into those tanks are also very, very cold and will condense against the otherwise and relatively super hot and humid air of the South Texas environment. I would assume similar here, and that is actually we see evidence of thermal conditioning of at least the propellant lines, and we get a call out for Merlin engine chill at T-minus 7 minutes. But it's a lot more difficult to spot any sort of condensation of that sort with like gas conditioning with Falcon 9. But what's easy to spot right now is frost on the bottom of Falcon 9's first stage liquid oxygen tank, which is visual confirmation beyond the actual confirmation from SpaceX that they are well into prop load at this point. What you are seeing right now is, as we just said, the bottom of the first stage LOX tank. The RP1 tank is right below that, and then there is a similar process happening up top for the second stage, at least in terms of the RP1 tank. Once they wrap up stage 2 RP1 load, we will see a big old vent at T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, and that will conclude around T-minus 16 minutes, and that is our other visual indicator that they have begun stage 2 liquid oxygen loading. So things are finally progressing towards T0 tonight.
Can I just say, Max, that transition was absolute butter. That was super smooth.
I learned from the best, Sawyer.
Oh, shucks. Thank you. You know I don't need my ego inflated more than it already is, but thank you.
Okay, then I'm all self-taught then. Take that.
Fair enough. Which Mark Lamb coming in saying, Sawyer needs pun tokens, so here are 10 more. Go NSF, go SpaceX and Starlink. To heck with the rest of this week's news. I need good vibes tonight. Well, we don't want too many vibes because then that's pogo. So we'll stick with the good vibes, I guess, then.
Oh, Jesus.
See?
Jesus.
Hey. Okay, 9 pun tokens remaining. So there we go. Thank you very much.
At this pace, you'll be out before the night's even over, Sawyer.
You say it like it's a bad thing.
Yeah, true, actually.
Here's one from 9/8 Central. They're asking, does the booster have heat shield material on the aft section for re-entry? So what is there in terms of thermal protection, or is there any for the bottom of Falcon 9? To either of you, whoever wants to take that.
Yes, there is. So the black material you see in between the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the bottom of the first stage, and that also kind of creeps upwards onto the side of it, is a sort of thermal protection system, or TPS. It's not quite like the tiles used on Starship or the space shuttle, and it's also not ablative. Any material used on Falcon 9 is meant to be either quickly refurbished or completely reusable. And in this case, this is this booster's 8th assigned flight. So, assuming a lot of those panels haven't been swapped out, they have been used quite a bit. And it's also worth noting that they don't need a thermal protection system like the sorts that we see on, say, vehicles traveling at or near orbital velocity, because it is traveling a lot slower. But because it's still coming in at near hypersonic speeds, you do need to have some sort of thermal protection, at least on the bottom of the booster, to prevent any sort of warpage or otherwise thermal damage to that section. And we see evidence of that on the titanium grid fins that we see near the black interstage on Falcon 9, as we see some plasma building up right after entry burn shuts down, and it begins to plunge into the more denser part of Earth's atmosphere. So yes, there is TPS involved.
Yeah, it's not like the big tiles that we're used to seeing on Shuttle or Starship, but it's still there. Let's see here. Also, congratulations, Florida Panthers fans. Totally unrelated.
No.
Yes, 5-4 final. Anyway, I'm totally paying attention to what's happening on screen right now, as we are 28 minutes away from liftoff of Sirius XM-10. We are getting close to that. So I saw someone saying earlier there's a couple people out there for their first launch. There was someone out in Miami. Max, what's the trajectory again for this, and who might be able to see it with this given trajectory?
So we don't get very many of these anymore. So Falcon 9 is heading off to a geosynchronous transfer orbit, or a geostationary transfer orbit, depending on how you want to call it. So in other words, it is heading straight east, unlike most of the payloads that it flies now, where it flies either northeast or southeast if it's going to the ISS, for example, like we have on Tuesday morning for AX4, or for, say, the Group 6 or Group 12 Starlink shells that take off on a 43-degree inclination south just north of the Bahamas. In this case, it is working with the Earth's rotation and heading directly straight east, because the altitude that the payload has to reach is quite high compared to those that travel to low Earth orbit. And so tonight, because it's going straight east, whether you are south or north of the pad, depending on the weather around you and how good your line of sight is toward the pad, it should look about the same regardless of where you are. So it's not like if it's going southeast, there's a benefit to being south of the pad or north and being north of the pad. So it should be a good show for everyone involved, or at least anyone who's in the area, assuming you have good enough visibility.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Clouds have been quite a factor across Florida today. It is clearer than it has been in some spots, though, at least. So it's one of those where if you're anywhere near that trajectory, it never hurts to go outside and take a look. And if you do happen to catch any video or photos of it, send it to us on our social channels. Love to see it. Tag us in it. I always enjoy seeing other people's views. Some people send me the streak shots they get sometimes. I honestly love seeing that. It's cool to see other people out there so passionate about it, enjoying it as much as us, and wanting to share it with us. So we really appreciate that. Someone saying East isn't as fun for anybody watching. It still has some fun to it. Let's see. Are there any viewing locations for this launch along the Wyoming coast? Nice. Adrian's not even here, still catching shade.
Wyoming coast. Is there a joke I'm missing there?
Yes. So apparently during one of the Starship streams, he saw WA, which is Western Australia, but he thought that was the state code for Wyoming. So he said the Wyoming coast.
Oh, yikes. Okay.
Which, yeah, WA is actually the state of Washington's code, but yeah.
I was going to say, yeah, Wyoming is WY, but Western Australia is WA is. I didn't even know that, so that's actually quite interesting.
But yeah, so he saw WA and didn't think Western Australia coast, thought the Wyoming coast. So that is now a running joke. Tell it to Adrian. He may slap you. Yes, Wyoming coast, best coast. 98 Central wondering also, what is a crush core? I hear that word used every now and then. Ryan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, crush core. Basically, it's kind of like a spring, but a one-time use spring, more or less, or one-time use shock absorber is kind of the put it. You basically take like an aluminum honeycomb structure, and well, you just kind of stick that in a core area, and when enough pressure is applied to that sort of thing, the crush core crushes itself, basically absorbing the impact or absorbing the energy, and it crushes. But usually at that point, then you have to swap it out for crush core because you've used it. So that's basically what it is. It's just like usually like a honeycomb structure or a kind of metal, or it doesn't even have to be a metal. It can be, paper or any kind of thing, but it's usually used to absorb some kind of basically just energy or whatnot. So,
and in the case of Falcon 9, those crush cores are used in each of the strut supports for each of its 4 landing legs, and they hopefully don't have to use them. Because usually Falcon 9 likes to come down on a usually somewhat slower velocity to where those crush cores aren't smushed. But in the case, say, if they're in rough seas or Falcon 9 has some sort of, I don't want to say miscalculation, but it has to make some sort of major correction for whatever reason, and it comes down somewhat on an angle, one leg might take a bit more weight, or a lot more weight in some cases, than the others for a brief second. And that will, I guess, smush in or crush that crush core and absorb that energy and help Falcon 9 land on the other 3 more level and then begin to support itself. We have seen that on occasion where Falcon 9 has come back into Port Canaveral at somewhat of an angle if it had like somewhat of a hard landing, but luckily those crush cores are pretty easy to swap out over at Hangar X. So it's not like they are a major component for reuse. I think those are one of the few pieces that are swapped out pretty often if they're crushed too bad.
By the way, I think we should call it smoosh core now. I like that.
Smoosh core. There's actually a second stage leaving McGregor right now.
Yep. Talk about the ultra stubby nozzle. No nozzle, best nozzle. It doesn't have any of the extensions on it there. So hopefully we will see that make its way soon to the Space Coast to launch on a Falcon 9. It could also go out to Vandenberg, but it's Vandenberg. But yeah, you could see all these Stage 2s rolling and see all of the testing going on at McGregor Live. So we have that as a 24/7 feed in addition to Space Coast Live and Starbase Live. Man, it's crazy to see the thing on the left side of your screen and the one that's on the right side of the screen attached to the rocket, and soon that will be that, but also one and done.
And the lag of a nozzle, you have to test fire it over at McGregor, because if they had the nozzle extension attached, it would not be able to fire correctly, as there would be a lot of flow separation at the very inside end of the nozzle, which would cause a whole bunch of vibrations and potentially destruction of the engine. So that they have to fire it with the lack of extension on it in order to, I guess, play it safe.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a reason why they typically only fire those in space too. The nozzles that they use for on orbit. If you ever see a Merlin vacuum nozzle compared to a regular Merlin nozzle, they are a lot wider, a lot longer. It's quite unique to see in comparison to them. So, speaking of Stage 2, Stage 2 should just about be done loading up RP1, or Rocket Propellant 1, and we will know that because of the T-minus 20-minute 20-second vent, and there she blows. So, Max, as we see the 20-minute 20-second vent, what can we expect now coming up in the timeline?
So as I was explaining earlier, this is the visual indication that they have begun chill down and thermal conditioning of the propellant lines inside of the transporter erector in preparation for stage 2 liquid oxygen loading. They had to do this because the last thing you want to do is flow any sort of super chilled or cryogenic fluid through any plumbing that is either at room temperature or outside temperature or any temperature that isn't anywhere near what the fluid passing through it is at because you run the risk of any flash gassing of the fluid passing through it, or heaven forbid, worst case scenario, you have any cracking or just any material shear and just causing other damage to the GSC surrounding that. So it is critical that all of the gear is down to super cold temperatures, and that is what we are seeing now. That is the excess liquid oxygen that is coming out of the valve. And once that ceases at around T-minus 16 and a half minutes, that is our visual indicator that stage 2 LOX load has begun.
Thank you very much. So we are getting closer to that, and now under 19 minutes away from the launch of the next Sirius XM radio satellite, SXM-10. This will be delivered off to geostationary transfer orbit, where the satellite will then do the final burns to bring itself into its geostationary orbit, where it will orbit above one single position over the Earth, which is usually good for satellite radio ones. That way your car or your house or your phone, wherever you use to get satellite radio, it only has to aim in one spot in the sky, and it knows, hey, there's a satellite there. I can get my radio from that one spot in the sky. So that's the benefit of these geostationary satellites, especially for satellite radio. Now, this one is very interesting. In terms of the second stage. Typically, for this type of geostationary transfer orbit that this mission is going into, we don't see a second stage entry burn. But this time we do, Ryan, right?
Wait, second stage entry burn?
For a deorbit.
Oh, deorbit. Well, the deorbit will just be you'll burn it. They'll run the engine, and it'll just re-enter on its own. The whole point is to try to burn it up in a controlled area, so that you don't get bits going over land where you don't want it to. So that's the plan, or at least they're going to attempt to do it. It seems like based off of the notices that they've put out.
Right, because normally we wouldn't see hazard zones for stage 2 reentry, but for this flight we do.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to see it. It'll help overall if they're able to pull it off, because of course it's less junk up in space, but it's also less of a chance of it re-entering where you don't want it to, and you being able to re-enter it in a controlled area and put the hardware that survives re-entry into a select area. And like they do a lot of times with Starlink missions where they dump a lot of it in the Indian Ocean and whatnot. So
Yep, and the way this one, the orbit is inclined and all of that too, we have those deorbit hazards to keep an eye out for there as well. Now, we will potentially see stage 2 come back and be destroyed essentially as it does its return. But one thing that we don't want to see destroyed on its return is this booster, which, Max, do you happen to have the history of the booster flying tonight, B-1085?
I do. So this is B-1085's 8th assigned mission, and its life so far has consisted of the missions from Crew 9, RRT-1, Firefly Blue Ghost Mission 1, which also launched the iSpace Resilience Lander, which unfortunately had its demise yesterday, unfortunately, but also launching Fram 2 and then 3 previous Starlink missions as a whole. So it's kind of weird to say, but a booster only having a history of 7, hopefully soon to be 8 flights is still pretty young in the modern age of SpaceX's Falcon 9 first stage booster fleet, as a majority of it now is at 15 flights or above, and there is a good chunk above 20 now as well, and the highest currently at 28 with B1067. So there is quite the line of history in the current Falcon 9 lineup. I believe they have somewhere between both coasts over at Vandenberg and also here at KSC and the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. There's somewhere around, I might need Alex's help in the back channel here for this, but I think it's somewhere between 15 to 18 active boosters. I think that sounds right. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but they have a pretty good rotation. Alex is saying it's close to 20 now. Okay. But still, so they have around 20 boosters to rotate around. I'm not quite sure how many of those are in Florida and how many are in Vandenberg. Presumably lesser are in Vandenberg because they have a not as close together cadence as we have in Florida, and we also have 2 pads here. Weird flex. But yeah, so there's around that many first stage boosters, and 1085 by comparison to a lot of others is still a youngin.
Yeah, it really is. And yet, as a youngin, it has launched 8 people into space and 2 lunar landers. So it's quite a resume for a young booster.
I believe actually, Sawyer, that is 6 astronauts because Crew 9 only launched with 2, not 4.
You got me there, but it was also the booster that flew the first astronauts from Slick 40.
That is also true, and it was also the booster that launched the first crew into a polar trajectory here in Florida, which is a remarkable achievement, and that was incredible to see a few months ago with the launch of Fram 2. And it's also launched in total 78 satellites. So I think it's safe to say these are our rookie numbers.
That's
so far.
That's still mind-boggling for a booster that's about to be on its 8th flight and that's only been in rotation, about a year? A little more?
Around there, yeah, if that even.
Yeah, it's impressive. Bonkies, shall we say. Let's see here. Continuing to take your questions, tagging at NASA Spaceflight. 98 Central is wondering, by the way, Ryan, is that cloud of LOX that we see venting flammable, or is it too dispersed?
That cloud you see coming off of the booster is just condensed air. Basically, it's the moisture from the air that's getting condensed and more or less frozen by just how cold the tank is. That's really all it is. It's just frost on the tank.
But what about from the 20-minute vent?
20-minute vent is it should just be, if I remember correctly, it's gaseous oxygen. I'm trying to make my brain work today. It's not working right now. It's
a late night. It's the late night, Ryan.
They do be hitting different.
It do be different. It is gaseous which is not flammable. It is not. People mistake this. Oxygen is not flammable. It makes things more flammable, is the better way to put it. So if that gaseous oxygen were to hit other stuff and there was an ignition source, it would be highly to ignite and catch fire. But it itself is not flammable. So
also why it's important that they do the purge before liftoff, because again, it's fine if there's, liquid oxygen or whatever around the vehicle, but once you ignite those engines and you have a source going by it mixed in with kerosene and you've got clouds of oxygen of the LOX there, that could be a bad day, right?
Very much so, as we saw with Booster 7.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's part of the importance with that. Continuing on with these questions, there was one about the Merlin vacuum chill. Should we see visible venting from that when they chill down stage 2?
Unfortunately not. That is a milestone that happens actually in flight, and if you listen into SpaceX comms, you will hear that call out, stage 2 engine chill or MVAC engine chill. So that happens in flight because they only have one engine to chill down as opposed to 9, which is obviously a much more complex process and takes more time, and that is why they do it at T-minus, or they begin that process at T-minus 7 minutes. So you should hear that call out in flight from SpaceX comps at around T plus, maybe 60 to 90 seconds, somewhere in that range.
Yep. So we will look out for that. Also, something to look out for, folks, in case you're unaware, we are about a week away from Father's Day. And if you're struggling, what should I get him for Father's Day? Well, maybe you can get something from the shop at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. In fact, we have an entire section that is dedicated just to merch that you can get for Father's Day for the dad who loves space just as much as you. You can get them items like the mugs and the patches and the shirts. We also have the gift of knowledge, including memberships to L2, which is our forums, which has awesome behind the scenes data and info and documents that you'll only find there, other amazing archive footage, and great conversations. Of course, you can give them Thrust That You Trust with one of the shirts, ask them if they've hugged a booster today, or not sure exactly what to get him, you can always just go with the NSF gift card there too. So that's all at shop.nasaspaceflight.com. And apologies for anyone who I just caused absolute panic to for getting Father's Day in about a week. All right, 9 minutes to go now. Ninja Guy Dan is asking, is the green flash that we see during engine shutdown caused by T-Tab? Is it engine-rich exhaust? Max?
Green flash at engine shutdown? Do we see a green flash at engine shutdown? I can't recall really ever seeing that. I know that as Falcon 9 ascends, the color and shape of its exhaust from all 9 Merlins changes from bright yellow orange to red to like blue and green and like borderline purple up up high. But that is just, I guess, the shutdown procedure and mixture that the Merlins go through in their shutdown procedures. In terms of the actual sequence per each engine and the actual valve closing sequences, that is not knowledge that we are privy to. So as we basically considering how reliable Falcon 9 is now to this point, I would say it's all very normal.
Ninja Guy did said more of a flare of green during the landing burn.
Oh, I see. That could be just some T-Tab coming through. Either that or it's plasma building up on the inside. I'm not quite sure.
Unless it's also just something with the cameras, because the color on them goes very wonky as it gets to landing too. We'll have to look together then as we see it land. Which, what are the assets downrange, Ryan, for this flight?
Your assets are going to be... Oh, man. I got to pull it back up here. I didn't have it up.
Shortfall, gravitas, and
There it
Doug.
goes.
Sorry, I had something in my throat.
Hey, I'll get it, Sawyer. Let me pull it back up. We have all these delays. We got shortfall of gravitas, otherwise known as ASOG, and we got Doug for fairing recovery. So those are our assets downrange for recovery of this of the fairings and the booster of this vehicle, as SpaceX does not recover the second stage of Falcon 9. They'll try to recover second stages of another rocket, but, well, not yet. So.
And in terms of other assets, our assets in the field for providing video to you is robots and Max. So, Max, I'm going to let you head off to your cameras and get everything set up for launch.
It is getting real, folks. Falcon 9 is awfully frosty, and T0 is. So thank you very much, everybody, and I will see y'all on the other side.
All right. And at this point, the engines are already getting chilled down for flight as we're talking about cooling and chilling and purging. Ryan, why do they need to chill down the 9 Merlin 1D engines?
Because you don't want to shock cool / shock heat your engines. So basically, the reason why they're about to basically funnel a ton of tons, actual tons of propellant, of like liquid densified, incredibly cold propellant, mainly liquid oxygen in this case. They do chill down the RP1. Of course, it's not as cold as liquid oxygen is. If you were to keep that at, say, Florida temperatures and then all of a sudden plummet it like minus 150 degrees or even 60, 170, or I mean, you just kind of whatever. You might shock cool it, at which point you'll crack it, you'll damage it, and then if you try to light it at that point, you might blow the engine up. And that's not great. You don't want to do that. So you want to slowly chill it down so that when you do go to start it and shove all the propellant through, you don't break the engine and blow it to pieces. So that's why you do that.
Yeah, that's usually a bad thing. We've seen it on the early days of Falcon, and it can handle an engine up, but we prefer not to. As we come up now on 4.5 minutes to go, we should be coming up on the retraction of the strongback. So that is the metallic structure. It's kind of hard to see from our view that we have here because of the crew access tower, but there you go. Now, if you look to just the left of the rocket in this view, you will see that strongback, that metallic structure. It will unclamp from underneath the fairing halves and retract 1.8 degrees. And you can see that that yellow bar towards the top there. That is the top of it. That helps provide propellants into the vehicle. It helps provide data lines. It helps provide thermal conditioning. It helps provide vents for part of it as well. So the strongback, a very significant piece, and it also does help transport the vehicle from the horizontal integration facility, the hangar basically, to the pad and raise it upright. So what do we have coming up now in the last parts of the countdown here, Ryan?
The last parts of the countdown, you basically have vent off, strongback. Strongback is, there it goes, starting to retract right there. You basically have vent off of all interface. That the tanks will start pressing for flight as they top off. Get pressures up to flight pressures, so make sure you got enough pressure in your tanks for supplying propellant to your engines. Because if you're too low of pressure, your propellant might not get down to your engines the way you want them. So you want a certain kind of pressure on that. Flight computer final checkouts and everything, and eventually, around T-1 minute or so, the flight computer takes control of the rocket. So at that point, it's in, if I remember, it's auto sequence. So flight computer then basically makes the decision on whether or not the rocket's good to go or not, and then at that point, if it's not, it's not. If it is, it goes. So we got stage 1 LOX load complete. So
Yep. So that's the liquid oxygen load. Vehicle getting very close to fully fueled. You will also see them do the gas line closeout shortly, in which case you will see what looks like a return of the 20-minute, 20-second vent. That is purging the lines of any remaining locks inside of them and getting everything set up and ready to go for that launch, which is currently set to lift off 2 minutes from now. So far, everything looking good. We had a few delays earlier, which were because of weather concerns, but everything looking good now weather-wise. For the launch of SXM-10, which is a satellite for Sirius XM satellite radio, going into a geostationary transfer orbit aboard Falcon 9, launching from Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, and that is booster 1085, which at this point now, it is fully fueled, and you see the gas line close out on your screen there. We're also hearing that weather is green, and the range is ready to support tonight's flight. That is what we like to hear. We are about to hit the 1 minute mark until flight. Once we do that, Falcon 9 will enter startup. As Ryan was talking about there, that's when the onboard computers will take control of the count. That is also when the tanks will pressurize to their final flight levels. So that should be underway right now. And it's a slight delay for when we receive word from them versus what we see, but we have confirmation Falcon 9 is in startup. About now, we should hopefully be hearing the go for launch from the launch director. And we have a go for launch. We are now 30 seconds away from liftoff. once it does launch, we will stop talking. We will let you listen in to all of the sounds. It does take a couple of seconds for the sounds of the rocket to reach our microphones, which are a couple miles away from the pad. So there will be a weird slight pause, but it will get there. 15 seconds now. Next up will be the activation of the rainbirds, which is a type of water deluge system. It can be a little hard to see with the shrubbery from our view. Followed by a green flash of TTEB, which will ignite the 9 Merlin 1D engines. There we go. We have ignition and liftoff of Falcon 9 and SXM-10, getting ready to blast the tunes, and now blast your ears with rocket noise. Great rumble tonight. Vehicle passing through max Q, maximum aerodynamic pressure, and they are now chilling the Merlin vacuum engine in anticipation for its ignition in just a little bit. Beautiful blue color there, and you'll see that plume expand as it gets into the thinner parts of the atmosphere. Gorgeous launch. You could see that vapor cone, and while the satellite will be ready to bring the tunes, the rocket bringing the noise tonight. That was spectacular. So we are now about 15 seconds away from 3 events in rapid succession. That will be main engine cutoff, MECO, followed by first and second stage separation, and SES-1, which will be the ignition of the second stage. So we should be seeing MECO any second. And there we go. That's main engine cutoff. And then the 2 stages will separate. And we should momentarily see that. That is ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine, the MVAC, on the second stage. Stage 1 will now work its way towards the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, to hopefully land. And again, our cameras are a bit ahead of the SpaceX feed, so you get a mini free replay here of that engine bell glowing there in the ignition on stage 2. So far, this is looking absolutely beautiful, and next up, we'll be exposing the Sirius satellite to space as the payload fairings jettison. Those have been protecting the payload through the atmospheric parts of flight here and the aerodynamic forces, and as it gets into thinner parts of the atmosphere and space, that's no longer needed, so they will fall away. We should be seeing that happening in just a few seconds from now. That vehicle already, by the way, 100 kilometers in altitude, almost 9,000 kilometers an hour. And there it is. There's fairing separation. There is that Sirius satellite exposed to space. And now that is on its way to geostationary transfer orbit, which, as a reminder for those who didn't get to hear it earlier, it's not going straight into geostationary orbit. So what does that kind of mean, Ryan?
Well, it's not going straight into it because they have to go through they're going through a transfer orbit. So basically, they're gonna go half their orbit's basically going to be it. So their apogee will be in the eventual orbit that they want to get to, and their perigee is still going to be in like. So the satellite will have to do the rest of the work to get there. So this is what you do when you're using a Falcon 9. If they wanted to get this straight into Geo, they probably could have used the Falcon Heavy to do it, but they're using a Falcon 9 to do this. So
Exactly. And for those who don't know, geostationary orbit basically means once the satellite is up in space, it will rotate at the same speed based off of its altitude as the Earth. So if you were on the Earth looking up at it, the satellite would stay in the exact same spot in the sky all the time. So that way your car radio or however you use to listen to Sirius satellite radio knows exactly where to look because the satellite is always there to bring you your music and talk shows and stuff. So we are coming up shortly on entry burn, and that will be when 3 engines on Falcon 9 will reignite and help slow itself down, as we like to say here, fighting fire with fire. And that first stage, by the way, is already past the highest point in its trajectory, or apogee. So it is now 100 kilometers in altitude and dropping. But you'll notice that speed is still climbing, and that's totally fine. That will start to drop here momentarily. And again, the fact that from now, we're about 3-ish minutes away from first stage landing.
supersonic retropropulsion.
Yes. What do we mean, by the way, with fighting fire with fire? How does that actually kind of work as we get ready for that ignition?
SpaceX ignites basically engines to create an exhaust plume, which creates a force field, more or less.
There it is, by the way, entry burn from Max's camera. Sorry to interrupt you. That is our tracking camera of it.
Basically, SpaceX is creating a force field of engine to protect the bottom of the rocket from the reentry heating, and it also a little bit to help it. It slows it down so it doesn't get as much heating through reentry as well. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch, basically, is what it is.
Exactly. Great camera work there, and that is shutdown of the entry burn. Unlike Starlink missions, this is one where we will have the second engine cutoff, or SECO-1, happen before the booster lands. So we will keep an eye on that. You can see already almost 19,000 kilometers per hour, 167 kilometers in altitude for the SiriusXM SXM-10 satellite. Meanwhile, the first stage, the bottom left, that speed scrubbing off very quickly. 16 kilometers in altitude, 3,000 kilometers an hour, getting to the point of landing on a shortfall of gravitas, the drone ship located downrange. So we will keep an eye out for that. Again, we should be approaching SECO-1 in the next 30 seconds or so, given the delay from a real-time clock in the top left versus the delay from the SpaceX feed. Already now 24,000 kilometers an hour. It picks up quite a bunch of speed. Seems a little bit faster than we're used to. Anyway, we have ignition there on the landing burn. That's a single engine igniting. And you can see there the grid fins, those things that look like waffles. Those are steering. Let's listen to the landing audio.
Landing lead deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed. Nominal orbit.
Touchdown. Absolutely beautiful landing. Booster 1085 successfully touching down on a shortfall of gravitas, earning that -9. That was beautiful. And as we were discussing during that, we had SECO-1, second engine cutoff 1. So that is the Merlin vacuum engine shutdown. It is called SECO-1 because there is another burn, SES-2, and that will happen closer to 26 minutes into flight. That's a little over a minute-long burn, followed by the deploy, 33 minutes and 11 seconds into the mission. Whew, that was spectacular. We will have the replays coming for you momentarily, but there you go on the left side of the screen. the beautiful view of the empty pad, and on the right side, the rare Stage 2 views in flight. In case you're wondering, by the way, Ryan, that is a massive satellite still.
That is a pretty big satellite. You wonder why SpaceX, they can get it to GTO, but they can't get it straight to GEO. Falcon. Yeah, the Falcon 9 is a pretty powerful rocket. It's in the high upper class of high medium lift, even some kind of heavy lift vehicle. However, that's a pretty big sat. So yeah, I mean volume, and it's a decent amount of mass just to try to get it up that high. Takes a lot of energy to get up into that kind of orbit. So
yeah, it's a 6,400 kilogram satellite in terms of mass. It's on the heavier side, and again, you see how big it is just in comparison to its position on Stage 2 there. So that was spectacular view. And again, we will have the spectacular replay views, coming back for you here momentarily. Man, that is now what was it? 79 satellites launched by this booster. Am I trying to remember that number right that Alex had? Yeah, 79 satellites launched by this booster and 6 humans.
Pretty good rap sheet so far. It's got a long way to go.
Oh yeah, this is only the beginning. It'd be interesting to see if anyone was actually able to go outside and see that as well. And no, I'm not. I refuse to ever say bingo right in the center. I'm not. Poor Jack. Which that has to go in the new intro whenever he makes that. Let's see here. Severin was wondering, this was a drone ship landing, of course, but when will we see the next RTLS? And spoiler alert, you don't have to wait long, right?
I actually have to go through the all upcoming missions. If you know what it is,
I do. It's Tuesday. It's Axiom 4.
Oh, right, Axiom 4. It's late, Sawyer. Plus, I haven't been keeping up with what's launching recently because I've been moving and working like the last so a bunch of the space stuff that's been happening just kind of not there.
You mean to tell me you don't regularly check Next Spaceflight, either nextspaceflight.com or using the Next Spaceflight app, where you can track everything that is going on in spaceflight, see all the launches, get notifications before they happen, and use data to see a visualization of it in the app with data from Flight Club?
Not every day. For me, at least.
For shame, Ryan, for shame.
Sorry.
This is a view, by the way, from our fleet cam. We have a camera out at Rusty's at the port. A great place to grab a bite, by the way, and view a launch if you're ever in there in the Cape area. So if you're ever not sure where to go for a launch and you want to grab a bite to eat, check out Rusty's. So we always thank them for putting the cameras out there. And genuinely, I go out there a bunch to get views of the launches. It is spectacular. I think I may have a shot in the shop from there, too. But it's like a rising sun, turning night into day. We say that, but it really does look like a sun. And now this is a view from one of our robotic cameras at the press site. This one is the better idea for night into day, because you'll see just how bright it gets. It never gets old. Again, it's these night launches, these late night launches, not Starlinks in that case, do be hitting different. But Max, how did this one hit tonight?
Very mosquito-y. It's an incredibly mosquito-filled night. I mean, considering we just had rain for most of the past week and a half or so, it is incredibly humid out here. Moisture is very much in the air, and there's not much of a wind to knock them down. So bugs are running rampant out here, and I have to tell you, I am feeling it. They are all over. It's tough to go more than 5 seconds without hearing a buzz in your ears, but that is not to take away from the specialness of seeing an artificial sunrise rise from Slick 40.
Yes, Chris Bergen saying he's never met a bitey insect. Come to Florida. We'll
Must
treat
be
you to some
nice.
launches and some mosquitoes. Yes.
Must be nice, Mr. Bergen. Must be nice.
The mosquitoes come all the way from Dirty Leeds just to Florida to do that. So
Oh yeah, must be nice getting, you just don't ever come by a lake or anywhere here up in Minnesota. Just don't. You'll get eaten alive as well. It's then some of the mosquitoes up here, you just don't want to mess with them. You just don't.
oh no, you do not. I believe this is going to be Max's tracking camera, if I'm remembering the view correctly.
This looks like it. Yes, sir. And there should also be audio with this one as well.
Let's listen in.
Yeah, if you want evidence of how buggy out here it is tonight, you saw more than a few crossing the lens there right in front. And all those little spots that you saw like in the plume, those are probably mosquitoes not too far away either. So that's how buggy it is out here tonight, folks. But still beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's that's the Florida weather for you. Also the Florida summers. I was out there the other week. I think the love bugs were back out too. It's getting into love bug season as well. Those things are massive. Just fair warning. But there we go. Falcon 9 beating the weather and continuing onward. For those who don't know what a love bug is, they are very large flying insects that tend to attach themselves to each other, shall we say, and tend to attach themselves to vehicles. There's some old political cartoons or cartoons back in the day of space shuttle covered in love bugs. It was very funny, but
Yeah, they're of no harm to humans, but they sure are a nuisance to drive through.
yeah. Yes, good chat, folks. I agree. Someone apparently did see them. Jonathan O saying they were able to see it from Tampa tonight. Very nice. And again,
Very
if anyone was able to see it, please send it to us on our socials. That's also where we will post information about satellite deploy and all other things happening in spaceflight. We are on X, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok. You could check us out on all of those and get the latest updates on all the space news, even when we are not live. But we are going to end our broadcast, even though SiriusXM does broadcast 24 hours. So, not sponsored by them, although they totally can. Ryan, thank you for joining me tonight.
It's a pleasure as always, Sawyer. Hey, I have to get those Falcon 9 flights in every once in a while, you know. Can't just all do Starship. So here I am. But pleasure as always.
Max, thank you for getting eaten alive out in the field and for all the awesome views tonight.
It is always a pleasure coming out and giving everyone views of the gorgeous place we call home here on the Space Coast at the Kennedy Space Center and at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It is always a pleasure. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming out, and we will see you again in just a few days for the launch of X4.
Yes, go inside, get away from the mosquitoes. Thank you, Carson Phillips, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and bringing the views to everyone today and providing the tunes during our commentary gap there as well. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for today's stream. Thank you, everybody, for joining. As Max mentioned, don't forget, we have Axiom 4 coming up on Tuesday early morning. That is a crew flight to the ISS. We have Shuttle Sunday coming up this Sunday. And of course, our 24/7 cameras always live for Space Coast, Starbase, and McGregor. We will see you for the next one, and have a great one, everybody.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes! Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. It's orange!
R45! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You bet. We don't need any more of these.